folks, it's Keith Gribbins here with Compact Equipment Magazine. I hope everyone is staying safe, healthy, and productive out there. This is another chapter in our new video series called Compact Equipment Conversations. Even though many of us are still working from home or social distancing in a big way, we are still finding ways to connect and discuss all the cool new off-highway construction machines and technologies coming into the compact equipment sector. Today, I'll be talking with Justin Perkins, Senior Product Manager for Stanley Infrastructure. We're going to be talking about vegetation management attachments for track loaders specifically. Justin, thanks for chatting.
Thank you so much, Keith. Great to talk to you.
Over the last few years, vegetation management has continued to grow in popularity for compact machinery, specifically for compact track loaders. Track loaders can harness a tremendous amount of hydraulic horsepower to wield a variety of vegetation management attachments, from flail mowers to drum mulchers. Plus, they run on tracks as opposed to wheels on a skid steer. So they're like little tanks with low ground pressure, great flotation, and no flats. Contractors are upfitting these compact track loaders with high-flow hydraulics, loads of safety guarding, hydraulic coolers on top, and a mulcher attachment of some sort, and performing a variety of jobs from pre-construction site clearing to maintenance around power lines. Justin, you just put together a cool webinar last week that I watched on this subject. In that, you talk about the importance of two terms, speed and finish, when choosing the right vegetation management attachment. Maybe you can help explain what that means, speed and finish in this context.
Absolutely. What I mean by finish is really the size and shape of the debris and chips that are left behind. And I think a good analogy here, and the reason that there is a trade-off between speed and finish, is it's a lot like chopping vegetables on your cutting board. So a really fine chop where you end up with small pieces, it's going to take you a lot longer than a more coarse chop. And it's the same concept in vegetation management. If you need to leave a very fine debris or chip size or a very certain shape debris, in general, this takes a lot longer than cases where a rougher finish is acceptable or more coarse finish. And I know that that probably sounds like a really obvious concept, but it's just so important when you're bidding a job and also when you're buying an attachment for your machine. You can save yourself a lot of time on the job site, put out a bid that's a lot more competitive, and also save a lot of money when you buy your equipment if you have a really good understanding of the requirements of the bid and you're making sure the attachment is a good match for those requirements.
Cool, because there are so many attachments to choose from. So let's maybe discuss the major categories of vegetation management attachments for skid steers and track loaders specifically. Different brands use varying terminology, but Stanley, how do you guys break it down?
Well, we have a really wide range of vegetation management attachments. We have some really economical attachments that are great in kind of more close-quartered urban settings, out to some really, really high-powered attachments that do great in more remote settings. And there's a lot of considerations to think about when you're choosing the right attachment, everything from the speed to the uptime to the chip size, the debris, and obviously the power that you're able to supply to that attachment. On the kind of more economical end of that scale, we have some really good products. Our Jaws product is a great example. It's just a really robust, durable tree and shrub puller, great for landscapers and those types of applications where you're up close to a house, you need to be gentle with turf, and you don't have a lot of flexibility with what you do with chips and debris, and so you just need to be really careful and pull that vegetation up by the roots. The core of this product category, though, in vegetation management is really in brush cutters and mulchers. And I think it's really interesting to talk about the differences between those two categories because they look very similar and they even have some overlap in the work that they perform, but they manage the host machine's power in completely different ways. And that is because the peak power demands on a mulcher are just so much greater than on a brush cutter. With a brush cutter, you're primarily cutting overgrowth and small trees. And the amount of hydraulic power that it takes to do this type of work, it is well within the capability of most machines. They can produce that power, and especially high flow machines. And so when you're looking at a brush cutter, I think the thing to understand is the hydraulic power that's coming off your machine, it's going directly to the blades, and that's the power that is performing the cutting work there. When you move out of brush and small trees and you move up into work that's more focused on larger trees and that's the bulk of your work, the power requirements in that type of work change dramatically. And the amount of power that it takes to mulch an entire tree, it is often going to exceed the hydraulic horsepower that your machine can generate. And so the way that a mulcher gets around that is that it uses the hydraulic power of the machine to spin up a really heavy disc or a drum. And that rotating element, it acts a lot like a flywheel. And so it's a lot like charging a battery. And when you engage with a tree, what's going to happen is the stored energy in that rotating element, you're going to get a really fast, really intense transfer of energy from that rotating element into the tree. And it's that energy that's going to perform the mulching action. Managing this stored power in the rotating element, it's so important to working effectively with these attachments that we've actually included a mulch power gauge on the back of our disc mulcher, so operators can really clearly see when they've achieved that full charge in the disc. That mulching category, you tend to have kind of two styles in that category. There's forestry mulcher, that's what we call it in Stanley Infrastructure and Paladin, and then the disc mulcher style. Our forestry mulcher is more of a rotor or drum style design that a lot of people are already pretty familiar with. And it produces a really nice, fine, consistent chip size, and you have a lot of control over debris placement. So that type of product is a really excellent choice for times when you need to leave a manicured appearance with a really tight debris field. It also includes a variable displacement motor, so you can really dial in the RPM and the torque to be really tightly matched to your machine and your application, because that's just really important when you're trying to produce that type of finish. Our disc mulcher is actually a new product that we just released this May. And where it's going to shine is in remote job sites where you don't need as fine of a finish and where you don't have as many requirements around debris placement. The disc mulcher basically trades that really fine chip size that you get with our forestry mulcher for faster overall processing. And so it leaves a pretty variable, coarse finish, but it's really aggressive and it's just much faster in general than the drum style forestry mulcher. And then, a lot of people, I think they're going to find themselves right in the middle of what I just described, where the majority of their work is going to be brush cutting, but they know that they're going to have a need for stump grinding and mulching. And for anybody who fits this type of profile, I'd encourage them to check out our Ground Shark Extreme. It's our heavy duty brush cutter, but unlike a traditional brush cutter, it's outfitted with a much heavier blade carrier, and you're able to get that flywheel effect with stored energy in the head. And it has an additional set of carbide teeth on the underside of that blade carrier. So it still acts like a brush cutter, and it's more in the price range of what people would expect for a brush cutter, but it does have that stump grinding capability that a lot of people need.
Wow, great summary. Now moving to the host machine, what's important about matching your track loader to the attachment? What sort of specs should the contractor keep in mind?
So there are many considerations depending on the attachment and also depending on the application. The most common machine features to consider are going to be flow, pressure, and rated operating capacity. And so basically, can your machine power this attachment and can your machine pick it up? For most of our attachments, we offer a few different flow ranges so you can better match the attachment to your machine. But we do still try to keep those flow ranges somewhat broad so that our customers will have some flexibility with moving attachments from machine to machine within their fleet. Track width is another very common consideration. There are a lot of cases where you need to clear your tracks, but you also don't want the attachment to extend very far beyond your track width because it can create instability or poor maneuverability. Cooling tends to be more of an application-specific consideration, and most attachments, when they're used normally, they won't have a cooling problem. So if you find that you're experiencing heat buildup during use, your best bet's probably to review your owner's manual and just make sure that the attachments are working properly. And if you're still having some trouble, give your dealer a call and see if they can help you out there.
Now, Justin, earlier you mentioned some price points about these variety of different attachments. I think that folks find the track loader an attractive alternative for vegetation management because it's a lot cheaper to get into than a dedicated tractor from the likes of Fecon or FAE. But how much do these attachments cost? Can you give us a range?
Well, it's a big range. For brush cutters, the range is about $5,000 to $12,000, and that depends on the flow and the size. And for mulchers, that range is a little higher. It's about $23,000 to $40,000. And the main factors there are size, flow, and then the tooth configuration that you put on that unit. But it's really interesting that you talked about these dedicated land tractors. I think it's so important to point out that those dedicated land tractors, like the ones you mentioned, these are not normal track loaders. These machines are producing anywhere from 2 to almost 10 times the amount of horsepower of a normal track loader. And the mulching heads for those machines are designed for that horsepower. So to your point, unless you have the volume of work to where you can have a machine almost completely focused on mulching, it's not going to make financial sense for a lot of people to invest in a dedicated machine like that. It's going to end up being cost prohibitive. And that's where Paladin's mulchers, both our forestry mulchers and our disc mulcher, are kind of more positioned for high flow machines with typical horsepower capabilities. And so for track loaders, we're targeting a horsepower range of anywhere from 60 to about 95 horsepower. And that's well within that sweet spot of where most high flow track loaders are going to be able to achieve.
Okay, interesting. Moving back to the attachments, what are some of the major options on vegetation management attachments? I know each category will differ and each brand will differ, but what are some of the common choices, ranging blades, teeth, rotors, motors, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, great question. For our products, we actually maintain a lot of standardization with options. And there are a couple of reasons for that. The first is that having more standard options, it helps us keep our service levels for parts availability extremely high. Just the fewer options we have, the easier it is for us to have great parts availability, which we know is really critical to users to be able to get parts quickly and service their equipment. But the second reason that we offer a lot of standardization is that we'll only offer options for products when there's a true performance trade-off and not just a price trade-off. So a great example here is with our forestry mulching teeth. We do offer two options in those teeth. We offer a hardened steel claw tooth, which is a very fast cut, but it's pretty susceptible to damage in rocky soils. Or we offer a double carbide tooth, which excels in rocky soil conditions, but it isn't as fast as the claw tooth. So giving consumers and customers a choice like that, it helps people get the best performance in their specific applications. What we don't tend to do though, is offer one product with just a cheap option and one product with that same product with a more expensive option. So like a cheap motor and an expensive motor option. What we're going to do instead is if there's an optimal motor, then that's the one that we're going to use. And what that does is it gives consumers confidence that when they see a Paladin product, they don't need to deep dive it to understand how it's configured and understand, what components are in it. And if it uses the nice motor or if it doesn't use the nice motor, we want them to know that when they see our brand and they see our product, it has good quality components in it just regardless. And all that they need to understand is their application and if that unit is going to fit their application.
Justin, you just mentioned Paladin, but you're from Stanley Infrastructure, which is maybe a name that some of our readers don't know, but it is now the home to attachment brands we've been working with for decades, like Paladin and Pango. Maybe you can give us an overview of the company, which is all part of Stanley Black & Decker now.
Yeah, so Stanley Black & Decker is probably best known in the consumer tool space for brands like Black & Decker and Stanley, but also DeWalt and Craftsman and Irwin. What people probably don't know, though, is that we have a large portion of the business focused on the industrial space, and Stanley Infrastructure is a part of that business. So Stanley Infrastructure acquired Paladin and Pango in March of 2019. And once you combine together Paladin and Pango with some of the other brands that were already part of Stanley Infrastructure, like LaBounty, which is in the demolition shears and scrap processing space, or Dubuis, or Stanley hydraulic tools, you start getting this organization that it's just so much better together than it was when it was two separate businesses. Being in the infrastructure business and the compact equipment business, it's a lot more than just making attachments. ultimately, it means we're in the business of productivity and reliability. And that's not just for the people who use our tools, but it's for all of the businesses that are downstream from us. Those business partners, they're looking to us to provide simplicity and ease of doing business and stability. And so by coming together under Stanley Infrastructure, if we can provide better systems for our downstream business partners to make their lives easier, if we can be a more stable business partner, then it creates a tremendous additional value for those customers that goes beyond just great products.
Now Stanley offers just so many different attachments to choose from. But maybe, Justin, you can give us what vegetation management tool that has you most excited these days, and it could be from any of the many brands that you guys offer.
Sure. The product I'm most excited about right now is our MX brush cutter. This is our new brush cutter series for mini excavators in the 3 to 10 metric ton range. I think consumers are going to love it because it has some features like our patent pending tilt latch and a hinge debris shield. They just make it really easy to use. And basically these features work together to let you make really aggressive cuts without having to worry about your approach and your positioning and being so concerned with that sort of stuff. But where I think the MX is really going to shine is in the rental market. And that's because it's just super durable. It uses this mounting system that is extremely versatile, and it doesn't require a K-strain line to be installed on your excavator. And what that means for rental fleet owners is that it's very broadly and very quickly versatile across their fleet. So even if their fleet is not all the same make of machine, you're going to be able to move that cutter around really easily. So I'm really excited to see how the market reacts to the MX over the next 18 months.
Very cool. Great info, Justin. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to Compact Equipment today.
Thank you, Keith. My pleasure.
CE readers, you can visit www.compactequip.com for more information on Stanley and vegetation management overall. Thanks for tuning in, and be safe out there. Bye for now.